you know, I've been having trouble with the clutch slipping on the muscle hatch since I put the aluminium billet flywheel in. And initially I thought that it was a mechanical problem, the spacing of the flywheel. As it turned out, it wasn't. It was a hydraulic problem. The slave cylinder had gone. I've been hoping to resolve the issue without having to pull the motor, but even with a new slave cylinder, last weekend at the third round in the New South Wales Hillclimb series, I still got chronic clutch slip. I think I may have worked out why, and I think it's a problem of my own making. Long story short, it's time to stop mucking around. I'm going to pull this bad boy out, split the motor and gearbox, and see exactly what's going on with the clutch. As soon as I plonked my worn clutch on my Newcastle Clutch Guru's workshop bench, he pointed to my pressure plate and he said, "I can see what your problem is straight away. It's a self-adjusting pressure plate that winds itself out to take up the clutch wear. So when we put new pads on your worn driven lining and you put it all back together again, there was no clearance because that plate was wound right out. The last thing," he said, "that you want on a race car is a self-adjusting pressure plate." Well, I'd never heard anything about those before, so that was a learning exercise for me. The trouble is, this manual V6 Honda is not unusual in Australia. It's not rare. It's unique. And because it's the only one in this country, my local clutch guys couldn't find a pressure plate to match to it. So they sent it 1,000 miles interstate to Adelaide for a national importer to look at. And he couldn't match it either. This Honda V6 swap may be one of a kind in Australia, but they're fairly common in America and Mexico. So I asked my J-Swap racing buddies in America what and who they'd recommend for a clutch. And one name just kept coming up again and again, Competition Clutch. And one of my mates actually sent me their product listing with all the different kits so I could see which was their toughest kit designed for competition. And looking at that information, I discovered another reason why this clutch cover plate didn't work on this aluminium flywheel. Competition clutch had separate listings marked for dual mass and for single mass flywheels because their thicknesses are different and the spacing out of where the bearing touches it is different as well. And so I hadn't thought about that, and so unthinkingly I put a clutch cover designed for a dual mass flywheel on a single mass flywheel. Another learning experience. And here she is at last, all the way from America. That's the old pressure plate, but designed for a dual mass flywheel and self-adjusting. And this is the new one, race pressure plate, designed for a single mass flywheel. And I don't know whether you can see it or not. This is not as thick as this, but the bearing surface is way more out from the flywheel on this one compared to that. I'm not going to use the driven plate that came with the Competition Masters American kit because it's got springs in it, and luckily I have the option of the original plate which doesn't have springs in it, and that will give me a better launch off the line, which is critical in hill climbing. And when the local guys put new ceramic pads on this, I matched the chemical makeup of these pads to the steel drive surface inserted in the aluminium flywheel, because most ceramic pads are designed for cast iron flywheels, but if you use them with steel under racing conditions, they melt and they can glue the whole clutch setup together. And so the local guys were right on top of that and matched those lines. To get this clutch cover on my aluminium flywheel, there's some minor adjustments to do. The studs on these aluminium flywheels are larger, and so the holes have to be increased a little bit. But that's no different to what I had to do with the previous plate. So it's time to get all this stuff together and get a grip.
Civic is all back together, and just in a little test in the garage, which is all I can do at the moment because my property is all dirt. But driving in the garage, the clutch seems to be working really well. It's got really good bite, and I've got a proper pedal feel, which I've never had since I changed to this aluminium flywheel. So, touch wood, everything appears to be fixed. I was wanting to do a test if I could. It's 5 weeks till my next state Hillclimb round at Grafton, which is a track I absolutely love. And there was an event on at my local track about 20 minutes away in 3 weeks, and I was hoping to go there and use that as a test event. But when the sup regs came out, entries are limited to members of the club, and although it was my club, I'm not a member anymore. And it's also limited to people who haven't run there for the last 3 years. It's a come and try day designed for newcomers. So I held a number of records there. And I still hold one at the moment. So I'm definitely not a new chum. So I won't get in there. So I'll have to go to Grafton and hit that cold and presume the car's okay. But I'm really excited now. It took me 24 hours after I finished the build to get to that point. I guess it was just the nervousness after all the problems that I've had. But I'm confident the car's fixed now, and it should go better than it ever has.